one by the side of each man, leaning the handle against his knee. While performing this significant act she uttered not a word, but returned to her own seat in silence, retaining a sharp hatchet for herself. With such determined spirits to assail, it was well for the savages that they did not approach within arm's length of those whom they were pursuing. They would certainly have met with a bloody reception. The savages, hearing of success, relinquished the pursuit and returned to their demoniac orgies around the camp fires. It was supposed that they had captured a boat which was descending the river the day before, and that their extraordinary revelry was accompanied by the roasting of their captives. A son of Mr. Rowan, but 10 years of age, who subsequently became one of the most distinguished men in Kentucky, was present on this occasion. He frequently, in after years, alluded to the indescribable sensations of sublimity and terror which the scene inspired. The gloom of the night, the solemn flow of the majestic river, the dim view of the forests on either side, the gleam of the camp fires of the Indians, around which the half clad savages were dancing in hideous contortions, the unearthly yells in which every demoniac passion seemed contending for the mastery, the shout which was given when they discovered the boats beneath the shadows of the opposite cliffs, the pursuit of the canoes with redoubled vehemence of hooting, the rapidity with which, with brawny arms, they paddled their boats to and fro, the breathless silence which pervaded the flat boat while for more than an hour the occupants awaited, momentarily expecting the terrible onset, and above all, the fortitude and heroism displayed by his mother, all these combined to leave an impression upon the mind of the boy which could never be obliterated. Few will be able to read the record of this adventure without emotion. What then must it have been to have experienced it in bodily presence, and to have shared in all its terrible dangers? As we have said before, there was no distinctly proclaimed war at this time between the pioneers and the Indians. While lawless men on both sides were committing the most atrocious outrages, the chiefs and the legitimate authorities were nominally at peace. The red men, whether engaged in what they deemed lawful warfare, or moving in plundering bands, were in the habit of inflicting upon their captives the most dreadful tortures which their ingenuity could devise. The white men could not retaliate by the perpetration of such revolting cruelty. It was probably a suggestion of Colonel Boone that a council might be held with the Indian chiefs, and a treaty formed by which prisoners should be exempted from torture and exchanged as in civilized warfare. The Indians were by no means reckless of the lives of their warriors, and would probably be very ready to give up a white captive, if by so doing they could receive one of their own braves in return. A council was held at a station where Maysville now stands. Colonel Boone was at once selected as the man of all others most fit to take part in these deliberations. He was not only thoroughly acquainted with the Indians, their habits, their modes of thought, and the motives most likely to influence their minds, but his own peculiar character seemed just the one calculated to inspire them with admiration. The principle was here adopted of an exchange of prisoners, which, notwithstanding the continued violence of the lawless, saved the lives of many captives. It is an interesting fact, illustrative of the sagacity and extraordinary power of Colonel Boone over the Indian mind, that the chiefs with one consent agreed in grateful commemoration of this treaty, that if any captive should hereafter be taken by them from Maysville, that captives should be treated with every possible degree of lenity. And it is worthy of record that such a captive was subsequently taken, and that the Indians with the most scrupulous fidelity fulfilled their pledge. Indeed, it is difficult for an impartial historian to deny that these poor savages, ignorant and cruel as they were, often displayed a sense of honor which we do not so often find in their opponents. It is to be feared that were Indian historians to write the record of these wars, we should not find that they were always in the wrong. Colonel Boone, ejected from his lands, and thus left penniless, felt keenly the wrongs which were inflicted upon him. He knew full well that he had done 1,000 times more for Kentucky than any other man living or dead. He had conferred upon the state services which no money could purchase. Though to his intimate friends he confided his sufferings, he was too proud to utter loud complaints. In silence he endured. But Kentucky had ceased to be a happy home for him. Over all its broad and beautiful expanse, which he had opened to the world, there was not a single acre which he could call his own. And he had no money with which to purchase a farm of those speculators, into whose hands most of the lands had fallen. Could the good old man now rise from his grave, a Kentucky legislature would not long leave him landless. There is scarcely a cabin or mansion in the whole state where Daniel Boone would not meet with as hospitable a reception as grateful hearts could give. As a grief-stricken child rushes to its mother's arms for solace, so it is natural for man, when world-weary and struggling with adversity, to look back with longing eyes to the home of his childhood. The remembrance of its sunny days animates him, and its trivial sadnesses are forgotten. Thus with Daniel Boone. Houseless and stung by ingratitude, he turned his eyes to the far distant home of his childhood, on the banks of the Schuylkill. More than 40 years of a wonderfully adventurous life had passed, since he, a boy of 14, had accompanied his father in his removal from Reading in Berks County to North Carolina. Still the remarkable boy had left traces behind him which were not yet obliterated. He visited Reading, probably influenced by a faint hope of finding a home there. A few of his former acquaintances were living, and many family friends remained. By all he was received with the greatest kindness. But the frontier settlement of log huts, and the majestic surrounding forests filled with game, had entirely disappeared. Ambitious mansions adorned the hillsides, and all the appliances of advancing civilization met the eye. There could be no home here for Daniel Boone. Amid these strange scenes he felt as a stranger, and his heart yearned again for the solitudes of the forest. He longed to get beyond the reach of the lawyers' offices, and court houses, and land speculators. After a short visit he bade adieu forever to his friends upon the Schuylkill, and turned his steps again towards the setting sun. His feelings had been too deeply wounded to allow him to think of remaining a man without a home in Kentucky. Still the idea of leaving a region endeared to him by so many memories must have been very painful. He remembered vividly his long and painful journeys over the mountains, through the wilderness untrodden by the foot of the white man; his solitary exploration of the new Eden which he seemed to have found there; the glowing accounts he had carried back to his friends of the sunny skies, the salubrious clime, the fertile soil, and the majesty and loveliness of the landscape, of mountain, valley, lake, and river which Providence had lavished a prodigal hand in this garden of the Lord. One by one he had influenced his friends to emigrate, had led them to their new homes, had protected them against the savages; and now, when Kentucky had become a prosperous state in the Union, containing 30,000 inhabitants, he was cast aside, and under the forms of law was robbed of the few acres which he had cultivated as his own. His life embittered by these reflections, and seeing nothing to attract him in the wild and unknown regions beyond the Mississippi, Colonel Boone turned sadly back to Virginia. It was an easy task for him to remove. In such an hour one can sometimes well say, "Blessed be nothing." A few pack horses were sufficient to convey all his household goods. It is probable that his wife and children, indignant at the treatment which the husband and father had received, were glad to leave. This was doubtless one of the saddest journeys that Colonel Boone ever undertook. Traversing an almost pathless wilderness in a direction a little north of east from Boonesborough, he crossed the various spears of the Alleghany range, supporting his family with his rifle on the way, until after passing over 300 miles of the wilderness, he reached the mouth of the Kanawha River, as that stream flows from Virginia due north, and empties into the Ohio River.